Maplewood Heights was the kind of neighborhood real estate brochures drooled over. Brick homes lined up like proud soldiers, lawns always trimmed, porch lights glowing just right, and a level of order that felt more manufactured than lived in. But beneath that postcard perfection was a quiet hierarchy, led by one woman who ruled over the homeowners association like it was her personal fiefdom. Her name was Karen Whitmore. Yes, that Karen. Not just a woman named Karen, but the living embodiment of every HOA horror story ever posted on Reddit. Blonde bob, pastel sweaters, clipboard in hand, and an attitude sharp enough to slice a tree limb, especially if it grew an inch too far over the property line. When I moved in, it was supposed to be temporary. The police chief's position had recently opened in our town, Arborville, and after nearly 20 years in law enforcement, it felt like the right step. I didn't exactly announce my role. I like to keep a low profile when I'm off duty. Badges can create distance when what you want is to just be part of the neighborhood. The house was nice, a little too big for a single guy and his golden retriever, Max, but it had a fenced backyard, a shaded patio, and enough space between the homes to feel semi-private. Or so I thought. Karen made sure privacy was an illusion. From the moment I signed the papers, she was on my doorstep with a welcome packet, which was really just 30 pages of HOA rules in 12-point Times New Roman. No boats in the driveway, no brown mulch, red only, no basketball hoops, no non-standard American flags. I half expected it to list "no fun" as the final bullet point. She smiled through tightly pressed lips as she walked me through her suggestions, which sounded more like commandments. "And remember," she'd chirped, "if you need anything, I'm the HOA president." She handed me a business card with a small photo of her in a power blazer, like she was selling real estate or dreams, depending on how gullible you were. I gave her a nod, thanked her, and assumed that would be the extent of it. I was wrong. Karen had eyes everywhere. Cameras? Probably. But mostly neighbors she referred to as watchdogs, who were really just nosy retirees with nothing better to do than report who didn't bring in their trash bins before 8 a.m. At first, I found her eccentric, then exhausting. The notices started coming a week later. Your grass is 1.5 inches too long. Your front porch light is a cool white instead of soft warm. You parked your car slightly over the concrete edge. That's a violation. It was petty, and I let most of it slide. Policing the city during the day meant I didn't have time, or energy, for neighborhood drama. But I started to suspect something was off when my monthly electric bill doubled in under 2 months. Max and I lived simply. Lights off when not in use, smart thermostat, no pool, no workshop, just 2 people. Well, 1 person and 1 dog, living quietly. Something didn't add up, so I started investigating. Not as the police chief, just as a homeowner who didn't like being taken for a fool. Little did I know this would uncover a web of entitlement, manipulation, and power theft that would turn Maplewood Heights upside down. And Karen? She was just getting warmed up. The first time I saw the power bill, I thought it was a mistake. I'd only been living in the house for a month and change, and my electric usage was about as average as it gets. The HVAC was set to a comfortable 72. I used LED bulbs, didn't run a workshop or charge a Tesla in the garage. Max, my golden retriever, was the only other living creature inside, and last I checked, he wasn't using a hairdryer while watching Netflix. Yet here it was, $423.76. I blinked, then blinked again. I pulled up the previous homeowner's records. Thankfully, I'd saved the disclosures and utility history. His bills averaged around $160. That made sense for a 2-story, 3-bedroom suburban home with standard amenities. My usage, according to the new bill, had tripled. First instinct, faulty meter. Second instinct, faulty neighbor. It was the second thought that clung to me, because when I'd moved in, I'd noticed something odd. An outdoor outlet near my side fence had a heavy-duty extension cord plugged in. I assumed it was from the contractors who were doing some final painting before I moved in, but they'd been gone for weeks, and yet the cord remained. Time for a little recon. I followed the cord as it disappeared through a neat hole in the bottom of my cedar privacy fence. The other side of that fence? Karen's backyard? Interesting. I stood there for a moment, just staring at the cord like it might offer me an explanation. It didn't. So I walked inside, grabbed my flashlight, and waited until the sun set. I didn't want to make assumptions, but I was about to make discoveries. That night, I took a slow walk around the perimeter of my house. The backyard was quiet, crickets chirping, porch lights dimmed. Karen's home was ablaze with light, oddly bright considering it was nearly midnight. There were humming sounds, too. Machines, maybe. I couldn't see much from my side, but I followed the cord's entry point again and gently pushed aside a loose fence slat. And there it was. Not one, not two, but 3 heavy-duty cords coming from my side of the fence, leading into Karen's garage. Inside, the garage was lit up like a Christmas tree. Freezers, fans, space heaters stacked up high, and, of all things, a tanning bed. A tanning bed. Karen had rigged her garage like a Vegas power plant, and I was footing the bill. I don't know if I was more shocked or impressed by the audacity. This wasn't just a casual outlet borrow for a holiday light display. This was theft. A planned, repeated, expensive theft. But I wasn't going to call her out just yet. Instead, I made coffee, sat down at my desk, and reviewed the city's utility laws. Theft of utilities was a Class A misdemeanor, but in some cases, especially if it exceeded $500 over a period of time, it could tip into felony territory. She had no idea who she was stealing from. But I wasn't ready to let her know just yet. Instead, I decided to get proof. The next day, I went to the local hardware store and picked up a few motion-activated trail cameras. I mounted one in the backyard, pointing at the outlet, and another tucked into the shrub line facing the back fence. One more on the side of the garage. Then I called a buddy, Franklin, one of our department's forensics guys, and asked if he could lend me a small power consumption meter. He was curious, but didn't pry. "You got a rogue air conditioner or something?" "Something like that," I replied. By week's end, I had all the data I needed. Power spikes aligned precisely with Karen's use hours, early morning, mid-afternoon, and again from 10 p.m. to midnight. The cameras caught the garage lights flickering on and the faint glow of the tanning bed through her windows. One video even showed her adjusting the extension cord. She looked both casual and brazen, like someone watering stolen plants. I finally had enough, but before cutting the cord, literally and figuratively, I decided to give her a chance to explain. Maybe she thought it was an old shared outlet. Maybe it was an accident. But I didn't believe that. Karen didn't accidentally do anything. She planned. Still, I knocked on her door 2 days later with a polite smile. "Karen," I said, "got a minute?" She blinked, surprised to see me. "Of course, officer. I mean, just a neighbor for now." That unsettled her a bit. I gestured toward the side of the house. "I've noticed a few cords going through our fence line. I think they're drawing power from my house. Know anything about that?" Her smile stiffened. "Oh, those. Just a temporary thing. The outlet in our garage was acting up and the electrician can't come until next month. Your side had a spare outlet, so I figured—" "You figured it was okay to plug in without asking?" "It's not a big deal," she said, brushing it off. "Besides, you're barely home, right?" That was it. The line that pushed me past patience. Right, I said with a nod. Thanks for the clarification. And the next morning I flipped the breaker. Let's just say Karen didn't take that well. Within 20 minutes, she was on the phone with 911, furious, flustered, and very loud. But what she didn't know, what made this story truly unforgettable, was that she had just reported her crime to the police. To me. The call came in to the non-emergency line at the Arborville Police Department just after 8 a.m. Dispatcher, Arborville PD, how may I assist you? Caller, frustrated and breathless. Yes, I want to report my neighbor for harassment and possibly tampering with my property. He shut off my power. Dispatcher, do you have an address, ma'am? Caller, yes, 428 Meadow Lane. That's where I live. His house is right next door. Dispatcher, do you know your neighbor's name? Caller, of course. His name is, something. He just moved in, tall, smug, drives a black Explorer. Thinks he's above the rules. The nerve. Dispatcher, we'll send someone out. I was sitting at my desk when the audio was forwarded to me. Within 10 seconds, I recognized the voice. Karen, full of indignation and half-baked accusations. She never used my name, probably because she didn't bother to learn it, or because it was easier to scream into the phone when you believed you were the victim. As police chief, I don't usually respond to minor civil complaints. But this one? I was already involved. She just didn't know how deeply. Still, for the sake of appearances, I sent Officer Martinez, one of our more level-headed guys, to go check it out. I told him to remain neutral and document everything, and I made sure to give him a heads up. Don't arrest the chief's dog, I joked. He's the only one who likes Karen. When Martinez arrived, Karen was already pacing her driveway like a lioness whose Wi-Fi had gone down mid-Netflix binge. She cut the cord, she ranted. I mean, he cut the cord. That's vandalism, right? Isn't that illegal? Martinez took notes, asked her to clarify, and took a look at the outlet. He asked where the other end of the cord went. That's when she got cagey. That's none of your business. That's on my property. Which, ironically, was exactly the issue. After documenting the cord trail, Officer Martinez came to my place. I greeted him at the door with a mug of coffee and a flash drive. Here's your evidence, I said. Time-stamped footage, plus the consumption data. He raised an eyebrow. You sure you don't want to handle this personally? I shrugged. Tempting. But I want the paperwork clean. She filed the complaint. Let's give her what she wants. What she didn't want, however, was what came next. That afternoon, I got a permit from the city to inspect the utility connections on both properties. It's part of a seldom-used city ordinance related to energy theft, but one I knew inside and out. When I showed up in uniform at her front door, badge out, clipboard in hand, Karen's face dropped so fast you'd think gravity doubled. You, she said flatly. Me, I replied. Chief of police. Surprise. Her eyes darted to the street like she was looking for an escape route. You tricked me. You didn't say you were a cop. You didn't ask. I stepped past her onto the property, with Martinez behind me. We followed the cord into the garage where the scene was enlightening, to say the least. There was the tanning bed, still warm, a stand-up freezer humming in the corner, plus 2 industrial-grade fans and a dehumidifier. Why? No idea. Maybe she was drying herbs. Maybe just enjoying the thrill of abusing shared resources. Either way, the power draw was substantial. You do realize this is theft, I said, glancing back at her. You've knowingly rerouted power from my property, used it for weeks, and concealed it with multiple cords. It was just temporary, she snapped. You've cost me over $800 in utilities so far. That's not temporary, Karen. That's targeted. That's illegal. Her face went red. "But I'm the HOA president." "Exactly," I said, "and that makes it worse." Because in her role, she wasn't just a neighbor. She had positional authority, influence. She enforced the rules, except when she decided they didn't apply to her. Martinez read her the formal warning and explained that she had the option to settle privately, pay for the stolen utilities, and remove the illegal wiring, or face a formal misdemeanor charge. Karen agreed, loudly, reluctantly, with a stormy glare. "Fine, it's handled." But it wasn't. The next morning, she posted on the neighborhood app, accusing me of harassment, abuse of power, and being a danger to the community. She forgot one thing, though. The internet isn't anonymous when your house number is in the username. Within minutes, I had screenshots. And within the hour, I received 5 messages from other neighbors. Each had a story about Karen abusing her role in the HOA. One said Karen fined them for having a non-regulation bird feeder. Another claimed she threatened to remove their swing set for being visible from the road. A pattern was emerging, and now that I had the power cord, the footage, and the neighborhood behind me, I was ready to expose it all. It's amazing what flipping a single switch can do. One minute, Karen's garage was humming like a server room. The next, silence. And not just any silence, offended silence. As if the very air around her could sense her rage brewing behind closed blinds. The breaker I'd flipped was clearly marked. "Outdoor, AUX, west wall." When I opened the panel, I noticed a handwritten note next to it. "Do not turn off. HOA approved." HOA approved? That was a new one. There was no HOA business that warranted direct power siphoning from another homeowner's property. This wasn't some communal pool heater. This was my power, my panel, and my dime. I flipped the switch. Click. Just like that, the cords running under the fence went dead. I half expected Karen to burst out of her house wielding a cease and desist letter and a frozen chicken from her now defunct garage freezer. Instead, I sat back on my patio, coffee in hand, Max at my feet, and waited. Didn't take long. 10 minutes later, I heard it. The shriek. "What did you do?" I didn't even need to turn around. Her voice echoed off the backyard fences like a warning siren. I calmly stood, turned, and faced the source of the fury. Karen was stomping across the lawn like she owned it. In her robe, phone in one hand, clipboard in the other. Her energy was somewhere between HOA president and doomsday cult leader. "You tampered with the power. That's a felony." I raised an eyebrow. "It's my power, Karen. That cord leads from my outlet, through my fence, and into your garage." "You had no right," she shouted. I took a slow sip from my mug. Actually, I had every right. Then I pulled out my phone and played back one of the trail cam recordings. In the clip, Karen was on camera, mid-afternoon, carefully adjusting the cords and checking the connection. The date and timestamp were burned into the lower corner. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding. Her face changed, just a flicker. Enough to register that she'd realized, maybe for the first time, that she was caught. She tried to recover. "That footage is illegal. You can't record me." I shrugged. "Cameras on my property, pointing at my fence line. Totally legal." She crossed her arms. "You're not getting away with this. I'm calling the HOA." That's when I smiled. "Karen, the HOA isn't a law enforcement agency. You don't have sovereign immunity because you hand out notices about grass height." And that's when she snapped. She whipped out her phone and, without hesitation, punched in the numbers. 911. "I'm reporting you for shutting off my electricity, for harassment, for abuse." What followed was equal parts comedy and tragedy. The dispatcher, ever professional, took her report. "We'll send an officer to check it out," they told her. She hung up and smirked. You're going to regret this. Yeah, I said. I think you might. 15 minutes later, a squad car pulled up. Not Martinez this time, Officer Dahlia, a no-nonsense beat cop with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. Karen marched to meet her, unloading a torrent of half-truths and dramatic accusations. He broke into my electrical. He shut down my garage. My husband's diabetic. That freezer has his medication. Which was news, considering she'd bragged at a board meeting that her husband was on a golf trip in Maui. Dahlia nodded politely, then walked up to me. "Chief," she said, trying not to grin, "want to fill me in?" I did. I showed her the footage, the photos, the power usage records, the extension cords, the permit from the city. Karen stood behind her, arms crossed, fuming. Her entitlement had finally hit a wall it couldn't knock down. "Looks like a pretty clear-cut case," Dahlia said. "Want me to write it up?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I'm giving her one last out." I turned to Karen. "You pay me back for the stolen utilities. You remove the cords. You issue a written apology to the neighborhood for abusing your role. And you step down from the HOA board. Or I press charges and pursue a full investigation." She stared at me like I'd asked her to sell her house and move to a commune. "You think you can blackmail me?" she snapped. "I think I can give you options," I said. "Because unlike you, I am the law." The truth hit harder than the breaker switch ever did. That evening, I got a message from the HOA vice president. "Hey, Chief, got a minute? I think you should hear what's been going on." And just like that, the floodgates opened. If there's one thing every 911 dispatcher learns early on, it's this. There are two types of emergencies, the ones that are real and the ones that are loud. Karen's call fell solidly into the second category. The transcript read like a dramatic monologue from a soap opera. "Dispatcher, 911. What is your emergency?" Karen, "Yes, I need help immediately. My neighbor has cut off power to my house and is threatening me. I believe he's tampered with my electrical system. He's trespassing. He's aggressive. I'm not safe." Dispatcher, "Ma'am, is anyone in immediate danger?" Karen, "Yes, my refrigerator is off, and my husband's medication is inside. It must be kept cold." Dispatcher, "Is your husband there now?" Karen, "No, he's in Hawaii. But that's not the point." The dispatcher handled it like a pro, but I could practically hear the eye roll through the radio. Karen didn't just call the police. She weaponized 911. And worse, she was lying to do it. Tampering with a utility you don't own. That's theft. Calling 911 for something that isn't a real emergency. That's abuse of emergency services, and a misdemeanor in most jurisdictions. What she didn't know was that Arborville PD had a new policy. Every 911 call is recorded, and all footage from officer body cams gets uploaded and reviewed by the Internal Review Unit. Guess who oversees that unit? Yours truly. Still, I wanted to handle things by the book. No favoritism, no bias. If someone else had done what Karen just pulled, they'd be getting a written citation and possibly facing charges. So I made the call. "Dahlia," I said, "we're escalating this. Pull the 911 logs, attach them to the body cam footage from your visit. I want it submitted to internal for review." She paused. "You sure?" I nodded. Let her dig her own hole. And oh, she kept digging. The next day, a post appeared on Maplewood Connect, the local social platform that made Nextdoor look tame. Posted under K. Whitmore 428. Neighborhood warning. A dangerous man is living among us. He's already tampered with utilities, stalked me with cameras, and impersonated an officer. Yes, really. He lives at 430 Meadow Lane. Be safe. I am organizing an emergency HOA meeting to deal with this immediately. There were 3 likes and 1 angry comment from a neighbor named Bonnie who wrote, "Karen, we know he's the police chief. This is ridiculous. You've harassed half the block. You fined me $75 for leaving my hose in the front yard." And that opened the gates. By lunchtime, the thread had over 100 replies. Apparently, everyone had a Karen story. One family was fined for painting their mailbox the wrong shade of blue. A couple was warned over their wind chimes being too loud. Another neighbor, an elderly veteran, had been threatened with decorative violations for hanging his American flag at a slight tilt. Karen didn't just run the HOA, she ran it. Like a petty dictator with a landscaping obsession and a taste for power. So when I got that message from the HOA vice president, Rick Thompson, I knew we were reaching a tipping point. We met at a local cafe the next morning. He was in his 60s, wore a faded polo with the HOA logo embroidered on it like a war medal, and looked like he hadn't slept well in months. "She's been a problem for years," Rick confessed, stirring his black coffee. "People have complained, but she always knows how to twist the rules, uses the bylaws like a sword." "Did the board vote her in?" I asked. He shook his head. "She appointed herself president when the previous guy stepped down. There wasn't even a proper election, and she's been controlling it ever since." He leaned in. "But if you're willing to help us get her out, by the book, we'll back you. The neighborhood is fed up." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about a chord anymore, or even an outrageous 911 call. This was a neighborhood being held hostage by one woman's ego. "Okay," I said, "let's do it the right way. I'll start by filing a report for abuse of emergency services. You start rallying the board." He nodded. "We'll call an emergency vote. She doesn't know it yet, but her reign is over." That evening, I filed my formal incident report against Karen Whitmore: theft of utilities, false claims to emergency services, misuse of HOA authority, and potential harassment. By the time I finished typing, it didn't feel personal anymore. It felt like justice. But Karen wasn't done fighting, because when word got out that a recall vote was being scheduled, she took it upon herself to wage war. One printed flyer, whispered rumor, and weaponized regulation at a time. She still didn't understand the rules had changed. She wasn't just dealing with a frustrated neighbor anymore. She was dealing with the police chief and an entire neighborhood that had finally had enough. By the time the emergency HOA meeting was scheduled, I had already done something I hadn't done in months. I changed out of uniform and walked straight into enemy territory. Karen's version of the HOA was less about community maintenance and more like a mini-government where she made the rules and enforced them with all the subtlety of a traffic stop at gunpoint. But now the tide had turned. The board was finally ready to hear the complaints they'd long swept under the rug. The meeting took place in the Maplewood Heights Community Clubhouse, a bland beige building that usually hosted craft fairs and bunco nights. That evening, though, it felt more like a courtroom. Every chair was filled. Residents stood against the walls. Some even brought snacks as if they knew this wasn't just going to be a meeting. It was going to be a reckoning. Karen, of course, was seated front and center behind a folding table marked HOA President, arms crossed, lips tight. Her signature clipboard was stacked with printed emails and highlighted HOA bylaw excerpts. She wore her power blazer. She always did when she needed to look official. She hadn't seen me enter at first, but when I sat down near the front, she stiffened like she'd been shot with a tranquilizer dart of indignation. The vice president, Rick, called the meeting to order. His voice was calm but serious. "Tonight, we're addressing multiple complaints regarding recent misuse of HOA authority. We'll be hearing statements, reviewing evidence, and, if necessary, voting on leadership changes per the bylaws." Karen immediately jumped in. Excuse me, Rick, but this meeting violates Section 4.2 of the HOA Charter. Emergency votes require 48 hours written notice, and I was not properly informed. You were given notice, Rick cut in smoothly. It was posted, emailed, and hand-delivered. Karen's face tightened. This is a witch hunt. Someone in the crowd muttered, We're just trying to get the witch out. That got a ripple of laughter. Karen shot a glare in every direction. Rick nodded to me. Chief Walker, would you like to speak? I stood slowly and walked to the front. I wasn't in uniform, but I brought presence. Not authority, just truth. My name is Eric Walker. I moved into this community 3 months ago. What I thought would be a peaceful neighborhood has instead turned into a daily standoff with an overreaching HOA president. I reached into my folder and handed Rick a copy of the report I'd filed. Karen Whitmore has been using my home's electricity without consent. I discovered 3 high-draw extension cords running from my backyard into her garage. The power usage exceeded $800 in 3 billing cycles. Murmurs erupted. Karen scoffed. I've documented the theft. I have time-stamped video footage, power consumption data, and a signed inspection permit. I gave Karen the chance to make it right. She refused. Instead, she called 911, falsely reported an emergency, and attempted to frame me as an aggressor. Now the room was buzzing. She called 911? Someone whispered behind me. Yes, I confirmed. And that false report is now part of an internal investigation. Karen stood up abruptly. He's lying. He's weaponizing his position to attack me. That was when Bonnie, the neighbor who'd once been fined for a hose, stood up from the back row. No, Karen, he's doing what we should have done a long time ago. The dam broke. One by one, neighbors began standing, each with a story. Fined $50 for a patriotic lawn decoration during the 4th of July. Threatened with legal action over planting unauthorized lavender. Harassed for allowing a child's bike to rest on the front porch. This isn't leadership, one man said. It's bullying. Rick looked over the crowd, then back at Karen. We'll now hold a vote. Karen tried one last time. I am the HOA. This is my neighborhood. No, Rick said. It's ours. The vote was swift and devastating. Out of 61 attendees, 58 voted to remove Karen from the board, effective immediately. 2 abstained. Only 1 voted to keep her. Karen. She stood frozen for a moment, jaw trembling. This isn't over, she muttered, snatching up her clipboard like it was a weapon. You'll regret this. But nobody stopped her as she stormed out of the building, the door slamming behind her like punctuation at the end of a badly written play. The room was quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon the whole room broke into applause. It wasn't for me. It was for each other. For standing up. For finally taking the power back, literally and figuratively. That night I went home, flipped my backyard lights on, and sat with Max on the patio. Peaceful, quiet, no cords, no surveillance, no HOA queen on a throne made of threats. I smiled, but I had a feeling Karen wouldn't go quietly into the night. And I was right. If Karen had been a cornered animal before, now she was an unleashed one. The day after the vote, the neighborhood woke up to chaos, but not the kind that comes from crime or disaster, the kind that comes from passive-aggressive war. Plastic signs were staked into lawns up and down Meadow Lane. Bright red letters screamed, HOA coup in progress, know the truth. Protect your property rights, say no to illegal votes. New board is fraudulent. At first I thought it was a prank, but no, the signs were real, and they were everywhere. Karen had apparently spent the entire night canvassing the neighborhood, no doubt emboldened by the one vote she got, her own. The rest of us had moved on, but she was just getting started. Rick called an emergency board meeting to officially transfer duties and vote in a new interim president. It should have been a formality, a paperwork shuffle, nothing more. But we all knew Karen wouldn't let go of her crown without scratching up the walls on her way out. The meeting was held in the same clubhouse. The vibe this time was different. Less angry mob, more cautious optimism. Karen wasn't on the agenda, but that didn't stop her from crashing it like it was the season finale of a bad reality show. We were 10 minutes into the session when the door slammed open. There she stood, wearing sunglasses indoors, clipboard in one hand, thick folder in the other, dressed like she was headed to court or war. "Before you proceed," she declared loudly, "I'm invoking my right to contest the validity of this board's actions under Article 3, Section B of the Maplewood Heights Covenant." Rick looked up, calm, steady, already expecting it. "You're no longer president, Karen. You don't have standing to contest anything." She smirked. "Oh, I think I do." She walked to the front, dropped the folder on the table with a loud thud. Inside are 37 homeowner signatures supporting a motion to nullify last night's vote due to procedural violations. I had to hand it to her. She didn't just retreat, she reloaded. Rick sighed and opened the folder, his brow furrowed. "These signatures, several of these people don't even live here anymore." Karen shrugged. "Their names are still on file. That's all that matters." That's when Bonnie stood up again, our new unlikely hero. "No, Karen, it's not all that matters. What matters is we're done letting you bully people with rules you twist to serve yourself." A few people clapped. Karen spun toward her. "You've always been jealous of my position." Bonnie laughed. "Jealous? Karen, you fined me for planting sunflowers. Sunflowers. You're the reason my kids think compliance notice means we're grounded again." Karen turned red. "You people are ungrateful." I cleared my throat. "Karen, you filed a false 911 report against me, stole power from my house, and misused your position for years. You're lucky we aren't pressing full criminal charges." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I was trying to help this neighborhood. Without me, this place will fall apart." Rick raised a hand. "We'll take our chances." The crowd agreed. At that point, Karen's mask cracked. Just a bit. "I gave everything to this community," she whispered, voice low. "And this is what I get? Public humiliation?" She turned slowly, faced the room. For a moment, I saw something behind her eyes. Not regret, not self-awareness. Just the hollow panic of someone who had built their entire identity around control, and now had none. She stormed out again, this time slower. No slamming doors, no threats. Just silence. After she left, we continued the meeting. A new interim president was appointed. A motion passed to review and revise the outdated bylaws Karen had long used as her shield. For the first time, the HOA felt like it was about helping, not harassing. As we wrapped up, Rick looked over at me. "Chief," he said, "thanks for stepping in, not just as law enforcement, but as a neighbor." I gave him a nod. "Sometimes protecting a city starts in your own backyard." That night, I passed by Karen's house. Her blinds were closed. The signs were gone. The cords, still in a heap by the fence like a monument to failed entitlement. Max barked once and moved on. And I smiled because I knew. She may have lost the power, but what she hated most was losing control. But there were still a few loose ends to tie up, because sometimes power doesn't just get cut, it gets investigated. After the drama of the board meeting blow-up, most of the neighborhood thought the Karen saga was finally over. But not me, because in law enforcement we know something the public often forgets. The cover-up is usually worse than the crime, and something about the way Karen handled herself, her frantic last-minute signature stunt, the folder full of dubious documentation, her obsession with being untouchable, told me there was more, a lot more. So, while the neighborhood took a collective sigh of relief, I went to work. The paper trail. Homeowners associations collect money. That money's supposed to be used for the good of the neighborhood, landscaping, maintenance, lighting, insurance. But when I requested to review the last 2 years of financials, strictly as a resident, mind you, I was met with a surprising amount of resistance. Rick, now the interim president, was supportive, but the treasurer, a quiet man named Carl, who had apparently been handpicked by Karen years ago, looked visibly uncomfortable when I asked for itemized spending reports. I'll have to dig them up, he mumbled. Could take a few days. Take your time, I said with a smile, but not too much time. 3 days later, I received a PDF file with 24 months of HOA expenditures, and right away, it stank. Over $12,000 in equipment rentals, $4,200 in communication system upgrades, a recurring monthly fee labeled private services, the most suspicious line, a $1,700 charge under electrical system reimbursement, president's residence. That's when my stomach dropped. Karen hadn't just been stealing electricity, she'd already reimbursed herself for it. In other words, she'd stolen power from my house, then used HOA funds, our dues, to repay herself for her own theft. It was like robbing a bank, then claiming travel expenses for gas and parking. Building the case, I took the financials and paired them with the evidence I'd already gathered. Trail cam footage, extension cord diagrams, electric bill comparisons, the 911 call transcript. It was a tapestry of entitlement, and every thread pointed back to Karen. But I wasn't going to the district attorney just yet. First, I went back to Rick. I laid the documents out on the table during a quiet evening meeting at the clubhouse. He studied them for a long time. She reimbursed herself, he said finally. Yep, she took the money from the community fund, and it gets worse. Look at these reimbursements from last December. $600 for holiday lighting compliance inspections. She fined 3 families for their lights not being HOA approved, he muttered, and then claimed she paid a contractor to inspect them, I finished. Only there's no contractor listed, no invoices, no names. Rick leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Why didn't we see this before? He asked. I didn't have the heart to say it plainly, because Karen made sure no one ever looked. She had weaponized obscurity, kept things complicated, murky, just legitimate-looking enough to avoid suspicion. Until now. The audit vote. Rick called a special session of the HOA board, this time closed to non-board members. I attended as an advisor, along with a city finance officer. We presented the documents and evidence to the newly seated board. After just 15 minutes of discussion, they voted unanimously to launch a full audit of HOA finances, suspend all reimbursements pending investigation, report the findings to the city's Community Oversight Office. Karen was formally banned from HOA participation during the review. They also froze the HOA account Karen had used to cut herself checks. Turns out, Karen had been reimbursing herself and approved vendors who didn't exist for years. The paper trail was shallow, sloppy, and damning. And just like that, the story of a stolen extension cord turned into a full-blown HOA embezzlement investigation. The legal side. I wasn't the one to press criminal charges. That decision was for the city. But I did pass along everything I had, wrapped neatly with a statement. This began as a neighborly dispute. It ended as a systemic abuse of power. The city launched an inquiry. Karen, facing civil litigation and potential criminal charges for misappropriation of funds, finally went silent. No more signs, no more flyers. Just a for sale sign that went up in her yard 6 weeks later. We never saw her again after that. But the impact she left, her reign of petty tyranny, remains a cautionary tale. Power, when unchecked, corrupts, even on the smallest street, even in the nicest neighborhood. It was a Saturday morning, cool, quiet, the kind that smells like fresh coffee and cut grass. Max and I were walking the block when we saw the truck. A big white moving truck. No company name. Just one of those anonymous rentals people use when they're leaving in a hurry. And there she was, Karen, hair in a bun, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scowl sharp enough to cut aluminum. She stood by her garage, barking orders at two movers who looked like they regretted taking the job. Even from across the street, I could tell this wasn't a planned, dignified departure. This was exile, the kind where pride goes out the window and is replaced with cardboard boxes marked fragile Christmas eagle statues. I stayed on the sidewalk and gave a polite nod. Karen saw me. She didn't nod back. Instead, she turned, stormed into her garage, and slammed a box onto the ground so hard I swear I heard ceramic angels cry. She wasn't moving because she wanted to. She was moving because she had to. The audit had concluded. The findings were ugly. Over $19,000 in misused HOA funds, including fictitious vendor reimbursements, fake equipment rentals, and utilities cover charges. 3 families had submitted formal complaints related to HOA fines and harassment. The city had opened a civil inquiry and referred parts of the case to the district attorney for further review. Karen had been given an option: pay restitution, step away, or fight it and risk prosecution. She chose the first option, though I'm sure it tasted like vinegar on her tongue. The final HOA vote wasn't even close. Karen was permanently barred from serving on any community board, in any capacity, in Arborville. Her name was entered into a local civic misconduct register, a quiet list of those banned from municipal influence due to proven malfeasance. When news got out that she was selling her home, the neighborhood reacted with what I can only describe as measured joy. No one threw a party. No one danced in the streets, but people smiled a little longer. Lawn chairs crept closer to the sidewalks. Kids rode bikes without being glared at for unauthorized chalk art. Even Rick, the new HOA president, stopped by my place that afternoon. "She's really gone?" he asked, sipping a lemonade I'd handed him. "Almost," I said. "Moving trucks still there." He shook his head. "Unreal. It's like watching a bad storm roll out after months of damage." "Yeah," I replied, "except this one filed compliance forms in triplicate." We both chuckled. Her final exit. That afternoon, Karen emerged again, this time with fewer dramatic flares. She was dressed plainly, hair down, no clipboard, just a purse slung over her shoulder and a tight-lipped expression like a statue carved out of denial. She gave the neighborhood one last sweeping look, as if daring someone to stop her. No one did. The truck pulled away at 3:47 p.m. A few people peeked from behind curtains. One waved. Karen didn't wave back. As the truck turned the corner and disappeared down Oak Ridge Boulevard, someone on Maplewood Connect posted a simple update. "The Queen has left the cul-de-sac." Dozens of likes, no comments, just quiet celebration. That evening I walked over to her now empty property. Max sniffed around the fence line. The extension cords were gone. The illegal outlets had been removed. The backyard was bare. The porch light still worked. I tested it. Funny thing was, it was wired into her own power grid the entire time. She never needed mine. She just wanted it. Control, entitlement. She wasn't driven by need. She was driven by the belief that the rules didn't apply to her. But they did. Eventually, they always do. Closure. Karen's story became local legend, the HOA tyrant taken down by the new neighbor. I had nothing to do with the rumors, but I won't pretend I didn't hear the whispers at the coffee shop or grocery store. They called me the cord cutter, the breaker of boards, even Karen's kryptonite. But the truth, it wasn't me alone. It was a neighborhood that finally said, enough. It was people standing up when they realized no one was coming to do it for them. And it was one bad cord, cut at the right time, that reminded us, power only matters when it's earned, not taken. After Karen finally moved out, the neighborhood felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off all our shoulders. The petty squabbles, the clandestine power plays, the whispered threats, they all began to fade like an unwelcome storm rolling past. The first Sunday after her departure, Rick organized a small block breakfast on the clubhouse lawn. Nothing fancy, just coffee, pancakes, and the kind of casual chatter that had been missing for too long. I showed up with Max, the dog leash wrapped loosely around my wrist, my uniform swapped out for jeans and a faded Maplewood t-shirt. No badge, no authority, just another neighbor. The smell of fresh syrup and sizzling bacon filled the air as people gathered around folding tables covered with checkered cloths. Kids chased each other near the swing set, laughter echoing where once there had been only tension. Rick raised his cup of orange juice and made a brief toast. To new beginnings, he said, to neighbors who actually want to be neighbors, and to a community that's stronger because it chose respect over fear. There was applause, genuine applause. Bonnie caught my eye and smiled. We finally did it, she said. We did, I agreed. A porch without politics. Later that afternoon, I sat on my own front porch. Max stretched out beside me, soaking in the late afternoon sun. No HOA patrols, no surprise inspections, no passive-aggressive notes taped to the mailbox. Just peace. The neighborhood was healing, and I could see it happening block by block. The creeping vines Karen had tried to choke out with bylaws and fines were blooming back. Neighbors started hosting barbecues. Kids played basketball on the driveway. People talked about community projects instead of compliance. It was as if a little spark had ignited inside all of us, a spark of hope that we could build something better. The lessons learned. What struck me most about the whole experience wasn't the drama or the investigation, but the reminder that power without accountability is dangerous. Community is built on trust, not fear. Sometimes the smallest actions, like cutting a cord, can start a revolution. And maybe, just maybe, that's what being a leader is really about. Not wielding control from a throne of rules and punishments, but listening, stepping back, and letting people feel safe enough to come together. What's next? As for me, I'm still the police chief, but I'm also a neighbor. And that dual role, sometimes tricky, reminds me every day why we need to protect not just laws, but communities. Max stretched, lifted his head, and let out a satisfied sigh. Ready for our walk? I asked. He wagged his tail, and as we headed down the sidewalk, I glanced back at the neighborhood, at the homes, the trees, the people. No cords, no conflicts, just the quiet hum of a place healing, growing, and thriving. For now, that was enough.